This is Nishil Dua. Welcome to the Remote Work Summit. On the panel now, I have George Samuels with us. He's the head of community and marketing at Draper Startup House. Welcome to the summit, George.
Glad to be here virtually.
Same here, George. And I feel virtually is the game these days. That's how all events and all meetings are supposed to be anyhow. George is here to share with us exactly how they executed a virtual event recently themselves. And they did this with a completely distributed, globally distributed remote team. So those are some interesting lessons that we are looking forward to. Over to you, George.
Thank you very much. And I know you guys at Remote Work Summit definitely going through your own lessons with the last 3 days.
3 days, it's been hectic, man.
Man. Yeah, we did 1 day. So yeah, props to you guys. All right, cool. I'll go ahead and start sharing. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my session. I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Going to put into present mode. Beautiful. So hello. Welcome to this session on remote work lessons from essentially our first virtual conference for Draper Startup House. And of course, because I know this is a remote work summit, the lessons I'm going to extract for you guys have to do with, what was happening in the background while we were putting all of this together. In less than 2 weeks, as you can see there, we did manage to get about 10K plus views across our live stream. Again, it was less than 2 weeks and done all completely remotely. So, yep, as mentioned, my name is George Siosi Samuels. I am the head of community and marketing for Draper Startup House. If you haven't heard of Draper Startup House, we are a chain of global startup hostels with a mission to empower 1 million entrepreneurs by 2030. We've been around for almost 2 years now. We've grown very rapidly. Started out in Singapore, then quickly expanded out across Bali, Myanmar, India, specifically Bangalore. Then we also expanded out to Tallinn, Estonia, then to Lisbon, Portugal, and a fair few cities in a very small space of time. And what was amazing about this particular business is just how grassroots and community-driven the business was. All of these sites essentially grew from a guest coming into one of the hostels and then going to their city and wanting to essentially build a hostel there under the same name. So Draper Startup House was actually previously Tribe Theory, and then recently merged with the Draper brand, which is owed to Tim Draper. So if you haven't heard of Tim Draper before, he's a very well-known U.S. investor, invests in a lot of tech companies. And if you haven't heard of him yet, please go search his name. Very interesting character. And so, with that, you're probably looking at this and going, a startup hostel. I wonder how those guys are doing in terms of a business model during this global pandemic and what looks like a possible depression, right? But, we're all still being very hopeful. And of course, what that means is everything is going online. And what I will share with you is essentially how we are pivoting and using our entrepreneurial skills and our remote working skills to be able to keep the business afloat despite what is happening in the world right now and with the business. So the problem. All right, so let's take a look at some of these articles. Half of U.S. hotels could close amid coronavirus crisis. Industry exec says. I don't think this just applies to the U.S. This applies everywhere right now. Hotels and tour operators face total meltdown. Yes, as a chain of global hostels, we were definitely impacted by the reduction and complete ban of travel between different countries. And then, as I mentioned, the International Monetary Fund predicts worst downturn since the Great Depression. On Twitter, some people are already calling this the Greater Depression because if you remember what happened in 2008, there were bank bailouts and people were expecting there to be a second global financial crisis. It was only a matter of time, and then coronavirus hit, and I think that was the pin to the bubble. So right now, we are, of course, all kind of in lockdown in each of our respective countries, and we are seeing the economic impacts. More so than the coronavirus itself. I think what is going to happen economically for the world is really part of a larger reset. So the opportunity. Right. So with the global pandemic and with the recession taking place, it is of course meant that anybody who was organizing events offline are now being forced to move their events and conferences online. Right. So we of course have seen a surge in a lot of tools and software that deal with online events and conferences booming. Especially Zoom, it previously was just being used for general meetings, and now actually people are using it to live stream, some of their conferences. But actually, Air Meet, what you're now tuning into to watch this is an example of a type of software company which is going to have a lot of demand, right? So business may be booming for them at this point in time. And of course, hotels go bust as Airbnb thrive. So the reason why I put this as an opportunity is because even Draper Startup House, even though it's an interconnected chain of startup hostels, there's room for innovation and thinking smartly about things. So what actually is happening right now at one of our sites or cities is in Bali, because there were a few entrepreneurs and digital nomads locally working remotely who got stuck there. They decided to actually all just stay at our hostel there. So instead of becoming a Draper Startup House, it's kind of become like a Draper Quarantine House, right? But it's perfect. It means that actually that site does have some business during this time, and they also get to interact and collaborate with one another while they're there, and at the same time look at how they can put their business online, right, and learn from one another. So our solution, at least part of it, to get started, it was actually to put on our own 24-hour global conference. We decided to operate it across Asia, Europe, and America, because that's where most of our hostels are currently. Forgot, of course. In Austin, Texas, we have also launched a new city, or new hostel site. And so that's why we had Asia, Europe, and America. The intention for Draper Startup House was, and probably and is still, to become a global chain. So hitting all those other continents that we haven't yet hit. So yes, breakthrough. Of course, the idea behind this event was to provide a series of talks with speakers from our networks that are dedicated to helping people break through these hard times. Because so many of us are entrepreneurial, at least in the Draper Startup House network, we thought that what better time than now to actually put something on that would help give motivation to folks, help give some faith and optimism, and some practical tips on what to do. So in preparation for this event, of course, if you are already used to remote work, these tools and applications may be familiar to you. But for those of you who are kind of new to all this, these were just some of the tools that we used in preparation to the event. So it wasn't necessarily related to the actual online event itself, but just some of the tools we used while we were remote working behind the scenes. So we were using Slack as our central communications hub. Some people use Microsoft Teams. Some teams even use WhatsApp, but as you scale, I'd probably recommend you to move outside of WhatsApp. Trello, we use that for task management for things related to the campaign and the project. We also use Google Drive, of course. That includes Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Sheets for file and doc management. And then for our promotions, we primarily used advertising spend on Facebook ads and Instagram ads. In preparation, we also use MailChimp for our emails. So results. In terms of what ended up happening for us with our conference, we had about 1,640 email registrants. Our goal was actually 800 because, I mentioned at the beginning that we did this in less than 2 weeks, but really the execution of everything was within the last week, because we spent about a week, coming up with ideas and trying to put together like, okay, what is this going to be? Who's going to do what? And then we needed to go and find speakers. So we were, we were scrambling in the background, but we knew how important this would be as well for a lot of people in our network. As every day, travel bans. We're reading in the news that everything was just one after another. More and more countries were implementing their travel bans, and it was crazy period, and still is. So Facebook views, we had a total of around 7,100 views across Asia, Europe, and America. You can see our Europe track probably had the most, with about 3,200 for our Facebook views. And then on Twitter, Periscope, we had around 4,800 views, right? So combine those two and you got about 11.9K views, right, across the board. Here is just an example of the Facebook ad spend. We spent about $100 there, so pretty limited, low budget, but we still managed to smash our goals. So that was useful. But yeah, we spent around $100 over 4 days to drive people to sign up for the breakthrough event. And the cost per engagement was 11 cents. And here's from Instagram. This one, actually surprising, was our most. We saw the most number of registrations take place from this particular ad. It was quite interesting to see, actually, because this was approved in the last day, right, of everything happening. Because due to coronavirus, Facebook and Instagram have a lot of people manually checking ads and reviewing them. I don't know how many exactly, but it was a little bit frustrating too, because it took them almost a day or two to approve. And so if we had known that, maybe would have had things done a little bit ahead of time. But again, we did this all in 2 weeks. Here, just a few more stats. At the time, we had average viewers at any one given time was anywhere between 50 to 150, actually. But people were coming in and out over the 24 hours, and that's how we ended up getting the 11,000 views, right, over time. And you can see below popular phrases, trending emojis, and then we were tracking, across Twitter and Facebook, who were some of the top chatters. Right, failures, gotta love these. So this is where I share with you what was happening in the background, right? I was saying that we were scrambling a little bit in the background, but when events and things come on, that's usually what can take place, right? Unless you're an experienced events or online events manager. If it's your first time with a new team putting all this together, a lot of lessons to be learned. And again, the Remote Work Summit team, I know you guys are probably experiencing many of these things now. Failures. So one of our most significant failures was after our Asia track. We actually, midway through our Asia track, we had YouTube essentially ban our account because our live stream went beyond, I think, 3 hours. And I think they have a limit on how many hours you can live stream to YouTube. And that really put a spanner in the works because we did not account for YouTube essentially just taking that out completely. We had actually tried to simply stream to YouTube only. We weren't using tools like Restream, to stream out to multiple platforms. And oops, I put here Restream.io did not work in our favor. That's technically not true. It's YouTube did not work in our favor. And we had actually wanted to use Restream originally. But yeah, we opted for YouTube because we thought that would be easier for people to have one link. Anyways, YouTube banned us. And so we had to quickly troubleshoot and set up Restream and then email everybody. And, the links that we were testing weren't right because we hadn't tested Restream right with all the different accounts. So yeah, we were stressing a bit because we knew that viewers or visitors that were watching, they wouldn't have known what was going on, right? Because the video and the account itself just got completely suspended. Yeah, so another one is we didn't get the PR we wanted out in time. So some of the PR agencies said, they needed more time. in order to get some of the stuff we wanted out, which is fair enough. The speaker lineup, some of the speakers we weren't able to get, or they dropped out because it was too short notice. Again, if you've already put on an online conference, this is probably not unsurprising. These things happen. Email confirmations were going to spam, right? So yeah, that was fun. So people who had registered were messaging us saying, "Hey, we didn't get the links to the actual live stream." Great. Time zones were confusing for people, so we had actually put some time zones in. I think we put CST, Central Standard Time, and what that meant was that people had to go and look that up and find out what the times were. And yeah, it's probably good if you give a link or something that makes it easier for people to know what the time is in their local region. Some speakers were not prepared properly. Classic. So yeah, when we were doing some of the sessions, some of the speakers, hadn't tested their equipment beforehand, so we had to improvise. Luckily, some of our team members got on, improvised, and it was great. There were images and event descriptions on our website that were difficult to read. So this is more just quality. Again, less than 2 weeks. These things are bound to happen. Unresponsive speakers. Yes, this was more just some speakers did not get in touch. I've got their hashtag breakthrough firefighters because that was actually something that I'll talk about in our successes that we very quickly had to create in Slack in order to troubleshoot things very rapidly. So yeah, here's some screenshots from that the breakthrough firefighting Slack channel. Here we go. One of our team members is like, "Oh my God, the video's gone." Here we go. "Oh no, the live video is interrupted." And we're scrambling like, "Oh no, what's going on?" And then, oh, here's some positivity. One of our team members is like, "Well, a positive outcome with YouTube going down. There was an increase of 146 followers for our Facebook page in 1 day." All right, so hey, that's a positive. Successes. Okay, so some of the successes that we had were, dedicated chat moderators for each time zone. I think that's something that if you're doing a virtual conference, is very important to have. So, have somebody sort of just manning the chats all the time. If you're in the social media world, this is a given. And that way you can also have them improvise. Sometimes there were things that speakers mentioned in their talk, and our moderators would actually go and get those links, find them, Google them very quickly, and put it back into the chat box. Which was, a great sort of improvising. Now, the other one was using Slack, as I said, to firefight together in real time. So if you are a team working remotely and you're dealing with something that's happening in real time, use a tool that is built for that. Keeping each other motivated with snapshots of our home setups. So this is more of energetic management. What to do, right, when you've got a team that's just doing all of these virtual sessions and it's ongoing and you're just sitting at your laptop and, needing to stretch and whatnot, and it can get quite boring and tiring. It's fascinating how tired you can get from sitting in one place. So, it's very important to have sort of a channel or an area that you can just motivate one another, while all of this is happening. Rapid troubleshooting. So again, having a good, competent team that can actually rapidly troubleshoot if anything goes wrong. So that's your support team. That could be just anyone who's technical on your team. Leveraging native live video on Facebook and Periscope. So one of the benefits, right? So originally when we started the live stream, we were only doing it to YouTube. We thought we would make that easier for people, but actually using a tool like Restream.io and live streaming out to the native platforms, that allowed, right, for a little bit more organic reach, which actually worked in our favor. And using something like Restream, it actually captures chat across all channels in one box. Multiple screens at home. So again, if you're a remote worker, invest in a few different screens. I've gotten used to using a laptop, but I was able to plug my laptop into our big screen TV in the lounge room, and that actually was great for this type of scenario. And optional, alcoholic beverages and energy drinks. Not necessarily the most healthiest thing. I didn't have any of that, but I know for a lot of people that on the team, it helped them. And here are some of those pictures of what was going on in the background, right? So here's the reality of these virtual conferences. Okay, as you can see, we've got in Lisbon, a laptop, got TV in the background there. Over in the lower right, we've got 2 laptops open for one of the speakers. I think that's to look at what's happening in the back end and then also what's happening on the front end in Facebook. Top, you can see there's a wine glass, the alcoholic beverages as we were talking about. And then we've got set up over here. This is in Singapore, I believe, in the top right. Right. So the conference was being live streamed on their TV, and everybody's just sort of chipping in, monitoring as the sessions were going. And then in the top left corner, what you got there is just a feature of our Periscope views, right? So we had about 4,300 viewers on that one. Cool. So, key takeaways for remote workers, I would say, is actually try to work in pairs. Remote workers are very used to working on their own. And now that everybody's going and working remotely, some people will be able to deal with this better than others. So try to work in pairs. It really does help, because when we were troubleshooting and firefighting the things for the breakthrough conference, it was actually good to have another technical person there. You can help each other out and just feed off of each other. And the same goes for any sort of other role in the team. Just try to find a pair, or coupling. Use tools like Zoom or StreamYard for live streams. So instead of Zoom, Restream, actually, because Restream was what worked really well for us. They really did help in the end. A different type of stress to manage. So key takeaways, stress-wise. So the thing with these virtual conferences, and the difference between this and a conference that's live, right? A live event is, with a live event, you get to move your body at least. I mean, it can be tiring, but it can be a very different type of tiring, right? It can be physically tiring as well, and mental. With a virtual conference, it's all mental. So, with that, you have to look at how you can manage your stress with that sort of workflow. And, for us, it really was just about being able to connect, well, at least for myself, connect with other members of the team while all this was going on. And then, having sort of fun little ways to celebrate, whether that is taking pictures of you drinking together or something else. But it's more energy stress management. Use tools like Slack for real-time communication. I mean, that's a given. Slack was a lifesaver. Slack is also experiencing a huge boom during these times, along with Zoom. And so if you're not using it, I highly recommend checking it out. Otherwise, there are competitors or alternatives like Microsoft Teams and other platforms. Give yourself more than 2 weeks for a virtual conference. Yes, if you can, give yourself a little bit more time. Definitely, having a 2-week constraint forced us to focus on the essentials. But, looking back, there were so many things that we could have done better, and we will definitely improve on for the future. Coordinate your time zones ahead of time. This is more to do, right? If you're going online, there's no barriers now to when people can tune in. But it still helps to be able to allow people from different regions, continents to tune in with you. And then, of course, trust in your team. I think as remote workers, when you are working remote, if you're not used to this type of work environment, you might have a desire to try and micromanage. And I've seen this in some teams already that find themselves suddenly remote. And so, refrain from doing that. You do have to trust in your team, and you're going to have to look at your KPIs and your metrics, and look at the output, the results. And then allow people the freedom to do what they need to. Because the reality is right now, even now, right, I am live streaming from my room. A lot of officials, a lot of people, a lot of shows are even being done from their rooms right now, because this is the reality. So there is definitely going to be a new normal after all this, if it isn't already taking place. And I thought, just before we wrap up, I thought I'd mention our Draper Entrepreneur Network. So speaking of Slack, we've actually created a Slack community called the Draper Entrepreneur Network. And this is really our way of being able to help and assist people at this time leveraging the connections and the network that we've built with Draper Startup House. It is actually probably the missing piece to what we didn't have with the offline physical spaces previously. And so, this time period has really forced us to actually now bring this into being, right? And so if you are interested in joining the Draper Entrepreneur Network, just go to den.draperstartuphouse.com. Here, you'll be connected to many of the others in our network, and especially if you're, an entrepreneur, startup, a digital nomad, or even a student, right, that has entrepreneurial aspirations. Definitely go sign up and check us out, because what we're going to be doing is bringing a whole lot of value into the community, into the network, to be able to assist people during these times. Because we know there's a lot of people who are losing their jobs, losing clients, and we know that the economic impact is going to be huge. But we believe that entrepreneurs do have the ingenuity, the creativity to be able to turn things around, right? And to be able to find solutions to problems in general. So with that, you probably get access to a lot of the well-known connections of Tim Draper. Maybe you might see Tim Draper every now and then. We won't promise that, but it is still the Draper Entrepreneur Network. And join us, say hello. We've got a welcome lobby, and you can say that you came from the Remote Work Summit, and we'll try and hook you up with something. And with that, just want to say thank you. If you want to contact me, my email address is right there, george@draperstartuphouse.com. If you want to connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn, you got Ciocism. And then for LinkedIn, it's just, you can just look up my name, George Ciosi Samuels, or GSS Samuels. All right. And that is it. Thank you all for tuning into this session. And I will just stop my share.
That was great. Thank you so much, George.
And there you go.
Thanks for sharing the entire structure, the entire plan, and especially, everything that went wrong, because that's what people don't usually share. And that's what we all need to know as well. Not just for people who are organizing events, but, going forward, I just feel that almost every company is going to have some form of virtual events, if not at the same scale, but probably, within their own companies. So that's definitely going to help a lot of people who are out there. So everyone, we are now open to questions. If you guys have any questions for George, feel free to ask them in the questions of the generals tab. We do have one question here already. What could you have done better if you had more time to prepare?
I actually have a whole list of things, so I will share it with you. So what would we have done differently? Okay, so we probably would have used a little bit of SMS features. So SMS everyone in the final days. We would have practiced the motto or the mantra of more speed, less haste. Sometimes I think we confuse the two, and so you can make a lot of hasty decisions. We'd probably send presentations of all speaker talks for our subscribers. Maybe have our chat moderators introduce speakers a little bit better. Remind speakers ahead of time as well, and maybe give them a little bit more guidance on how to set up their equipment or their audio, etc. Probably would have scheduled some media posts for during the conference. So we did a lot of scheduling of social media posts leading up to in the brief 2 weeks that we had. But then while we were actually doing the conference, I think we probably could have done a little bit better with the social media updates, in real time out to the public for those channels. Other things that we could have done well. I think they're more refinement things, right? Definitely making sure that the tool that we're using for streaming, maybe in the future it might be AirMeet, right? That is secure and does not just fail itself. To make sure that is good, and also to ensure that I think maybe even just like the tasks, right, for everyone leading up to, and even on the day, that everybody knows just very clearly like what each person is supposed to be doing. People had a general sense, but because we were just putting it all together pretty much last minute, that was definitely part of the haste, you know.
That's great. If you don't mind, I'll just probably summarize all of that you said because those are some really interesting pointers there. So essentially, and again, adding from our personal experience, it comes down to three things: doing the right kind of marketing, getting the right kind of content in place, and having the right platform or tool to execute everything on. So the SMS feature, the social media posts, they all fall into marketing, and that's
Exactly.
pretty important. Especially because we've been using SMS marketing ourselves, and it's
Yeah.
been working really good for us this time. Although what happens is it takes a couple of
Mm,
steps before a person is able to subscribe to the SMS notification, but it really works well. And in terms of content, those speaker reminders,
yes.
getting the right people on board, sharing the presentations, all those things work really well. So, yep, absolutely. Those are some really interesting pointers.
Cool.
I do have one question for you, George, myself. So, where do you think,
Sure.
or how do you think the entire inter-team communication or collaboration could have been done a lot better? Because I'm thinking from the perspective of a team that has probably not extensively worked remotely in the past, but that has been forced into this situation because of the COVID
Mm,
crisis. And then all of a sudden they have to put something together. Now, this something could be a campaign, it could be an event, it could be anything else. But the whole idea is what are the points or
mm,
what are the reasons why at some point the team communication, the team collaboration broke down, and how did you guys deal with that? And that's just within the team. So it doesn't have any impact on the event per se, but it's about how the team works with each other, especially in this stressful time,
mm.
and for you guys to put together an event in 2 weeks, and like you said, probably just in the last 1 week.
Yeah, I mean that is a great question because I think what has really thrown the team off is that we also had a lot of people who were primarily offline now finding themselves needing to contribute online, right? As part of the remote team. So previously, you could have an entire team just not really engage in our Slack together, right? They could function on their own. They just focus on the operations with their physical space. And then now all of a sudden, right, all the sites are essentially needing to shut down and they're thrown into a single Slack and we're being told that, okay, we're all focusing online now, right? So I think there's, typically you would have a little bit of time to train people on board, do some change management, all of that sort of stuff. Not in this situation, So I think what we had to do was just stay very prepared and aware of people's strengths and talents during this time. So one thing I took a note of is I did keep a document called for our retrospective, because after we do any event, we try to do a retrospective after, right? What worked, what didn't, and what needs improvement. So luckily we had that, and so people were contributing to it while stuff was happening. But with that, I was using that document also to jot down, okay, specific people during this time, how did they react and what strength came out, right? Then this actually contributes to what type of role they can take for either future events or even just ongoing. So I think that will help moving forward, but leading up to not having that in place, right? Just understanding people's roles for the thing is for the event is, yeah, very crucial. And yeah, in general, just for a team, clarity on your role and expectations, that'll work both offline and online.
Very interesting. That's really great advice, and I think everyone who's still here should definitely hear it and take into account and try and implement that wherever possible.